Let's begin right here. Let's begin not with belief, not with doctrine, not with anything or something that I need you to agree with. Let's just begin with observation. Right now, in this moment. Become aware and see if you can notice the most common movement of the human mind. All right? That most common movement of the human mind is that it wants to move away. It wants to move away from discomfort. It wants to move away from uncertainty, away from vulnerability. Away from anything that feels unpleasant, uncertain, unresolved, messy. And that movement away from is so fast, so automatic that most of the time we don't even recognize it as a movement away. It feels like life, like our reality. Something you notice tightens. There's a contraction. There's something in us that braces. There's something in us that, if you could put it into a word, there's something in us that says no. If we want a simple definition of suffering, it would be that inner no. A no, not to the sensation itself, not to the emotion itself, not even to the memory or anticipation itself, but our resistance to that experience. The inner refusal, the subtle contraction that says, this shouldn't be here. Things should be different than they are. I want what's not present right now. I don't want what is present right now. And this matters because almost all people believe that our unhappiness is caused, all right, that is derived. But these teachings point to something more precise. All right? Discomfort, unpleasantness, pain. Well, that's not optional in this life. But suffering, in many cases, think of it as that extra layer that gets added on top when the mind resists what's already here. And you can feel this directly. Think of a moment of physical discomfort, emotional discomfort, something very small, a tight shoulder, a dull headache. Think of a restless energy in the body. If the mind says yes, well, then it's just a sensation in the body. But if the mind says no, suddenly the mind has created a problem. And the problem isn't the sensation. The problem is our relationship to that sensation in the body. It's our stance. It's the attitude in the mind that is the source of our unhappiness. And this is why these teachings is so uncompromisingly practical, because it's not asking you to adopt a worldview. It's asking us to just look. Look within. When this is, that is. When this arises, that arises. When this ceases, that ceases. Right? When discomfort arises, the mind resists, and therefore suffering arises. And that's not because you're broken, because conditions create conditions. And here's the good news. If our unhappiness is conditioned, meaning it's created, it can be uncreated. That's been my experience. And it can be unconditioned. Our unhappiness can be uncreated. Not by force, not by willpower, but by really seeing the mechanism and the changing relationship. Think of this as you're learning techniques and practices to retrain the nervous system. When the brain registers a threat, all right, part of that brain signals danger. The sympathetic nervous system mobilizes. Our fight and flight begins. The body tightens, thought becomes urgent, the mind narrates. It tries to solve, fix, eliminate. And this isn't a failure on your part or my part or any of our parts. This is simply biology. But if every time discomfort arises, and we contract and flee from that discomfort, all right, the nervous system learns something over and over and over again, that it's learning that this is not safe to feel. So it doubles down, more vigilance, more control, more compulsive coping. And slowly resistance becomes identity. The identity says, I'm the kind of person who cannot handle this. I shouldn't be feeling this. I need to get rid of this. I need to find a way away from this, or fight it, or antidote it. And we can call this identity. These teachings call this, well, they call it clinging. So the work isn't to get rid of unpleasant experiences, sensations in the body, like when you wake up in the middle of the night and you feel anxious or worried or fearful. Our normal response to that sensation is to get away from it. All right? The work is to stop adding what we call the second arrow to that, the resistance to that sensation. So the first arrow, think of that, the first arrow is just the unavoidable pain that comes from being a human being. It's the second arrow, what the mind does next. That second arrow is the extra suffering that we create by resisting. All right. We can't always stop that first arrow from flying and landing, but we can learn and practice techniques to not fire that second arrow. We can learn to stop shooting ourselves again and again and again. And the doorway to this, all right, the doorway toward greater emotional harmony, greater and greater mental balance, greater self-control. That doorway is very simple. I think of it like reveal, feel, and allow. Or more traditionally, we just call this mindfulness. We call it equanimity, we call it compassion. Mindfulness reveals what is actually here, going on in our experience right now, in the body, without a story. And equanimity allows that to be here without the automatic no. And compassion is what naturally arises when the inner war begins to soften. It's not a sentimental compassion, just the quiet warmth that, well, it just remains when we stop fighting reality. This is why the contemplative path, right, isn't about becoming someone new. This path is about seeing clearly what is already happening, and then withdrawing the fuel, not feeding that spiral, not reinforcing the avoidance, we're simply allowing that wave, right, of emotion to move through and complete its cycle. We're not interfering, we're getting out of the way of our natural healing intelligence. When we let an emotion, a strong emotion, just simply be a strong emotion, it completes. But when we resist it, when we fight it, when we run away from it, or when we indulge it, well, it starts to become a loop. No feeling is ever final if we stop gripping it. And this is it's the deepest point. Right? The self, the one who feels so threatened by this experience, isn't what it appears to be. Under our close observation, it reveals itself as just a simple process of sensations and thoughts and feeling tones and mental atmosphere that's arising due to causes and conditions. It passes due to causes and conditions. And the sense of self, well, it's real as an experience, but it isn't solid in the way that we assume. And when we stop treating it as if it were a solid, enduring, distinct and separate entity, the urgency begins to soften. We don't have to just defend so much anymore. We don't have to win. We can just simply be here. So the teaching isn't life should feel good. The teaching is stop fighting what is already here. Just simply stop fighting. It's as if we're we're looking in the mirror and seeing something that we don't like, and we fight the mirror. And the harder we fight that mirror, the mirror punches back. But we can learn just to stop. And suddenly, the mirror becomes peaceful. And this isn't passivity. This is the most intimate form of courage, because it means that we are willing to feel what before we couldn't. And that willingness, well, it changes everything. It literally changes the brain. It literally changes our nervous system. It changes the heart. It changes what becomes possible in our relationships and in our lives. So let's move from just talking about this practice to actually start practicing it. And we're going to practice the exact pivot point. The moment an experience arises and the mind says no, we practice recognizing that inner no as it arises, and then we soften around it and discovering what remains. That's the amazing thing. What remains when that inner war ends? Take a few breaths just to settle into the posture that feels right and stable. Relaxed, focused, attentive responsiveness, not rigid, not collapsed, stable. Feel the points of contact between yourself and the cushion, the chair, the floor. Just notice the weight of the body. And simply allow yourself to be held. Let the eyes gently close if that feels comfortable. And slowly, gently bring your attention to the sensations of the body breathing. And don't try to change it. Just know it. The sensations of the rise and fall of the chest and belly, the sensation of the air, cool air as it enters your nostrils. And then just choose that one place where the sensations are most visible and apparent and easily recognizable, and just rest your attention there for a few breaths. And now notice the mind. Perhaps a thought was there when I started speaking. Because thought will arise. That isn't a problem. So when you notice that you were lost in a thought, just gently, compassionately return your attention to the breath. And when you notice that you were lost in a thought, a memory, a belief, a story, anticipation, whatever it was, gently return. Return back to your intention. I intend to pay attention to my breath. Rest your attention there on the breath. And notice, again, were you lost in a thought? At some point, whether it's 1 second or 15 minutes, at some point you will have forgotten. And then at some point you will remember. Gently return to your intention. I intend to pay attention to my breath. And rest your attention on the breath. Over and over again, 1 time. 10 times, 100 times, 10,000 times, and more. No scolding, no commentary, just return. Now, let's widen the field slightly. The breath is here, and also the whole body. Notice sounds. Allow sounds to be included. Notice the space around you. And you're not narrowing down to a point. You are settling into a broad and expansive, spacious field. You don't have to win in this. You just simply can be here. So, really take this to heart. The teaching isn't that life should feel good. The teaching is train your nervous system to stop fighting what's here. This isn't passivity. This is the most intimate form of courage. It's the most intimate form of courage because it means that we are finally willing to reveal and to truly feel. And that willingness changes everything. In time and consistent, wholehearted repetition, that process of revealing and feeling, well, that changes the brain. It changes how the nervous system works. It changes the heart. It changes what becomes possible in our relationships and in our lives. So again, look within. If there is a sensation that is pleasant, notice how there is a subtle or large impulse to hold on to that pleasant. If there is an unpleasant sensation, notice the impulse to push it away. If there's a neutral sensation, notice the impulse to drift, become restless and bored. Those impulses are not personal. Those impulses are conditioned responses. Now, gently scan the entire body for any area, any spot that could be a contraction, a tightening. It might be in the throat, the chest, the belly, the jaw, the forehead. Find one place where tension is most obvious. Might be in a tight fist. Might be in the forehead, in the shoulders. Just bring your attention to the raw sensation there. Not the story, not the reason, just the sensation. Pressure, tightness, perhaps heat or vibration. Rest your attention on just the raw sensation. Now, here's the practice. Notice if there's an inner node toward that sensation. Notice if you can detect a subtle bracing, a gross or subtle resistance, a quiet or loud wish for this to be different. But just recognize it. But don't do anything with it. Simply infuse it with non-interference. And now, let's experiment with a softening of that no. Not by forcing the sensation to change, but just by letting the sensation be there. You can even say silently on the out breath, yes, or let it be. Really be curious and see if you can detect or feel the difference between sensation plus resistance and sensation without resistance. Feel the difference. What does it feel like when there's a sensation plus resistance? And then notice the feeling of a sensation without that resistance. Even 1% less resistance is enough to feel the difference. Now, allow awareness to become larger than that sensation. Imagine the sensation floating in a wide open space. The sensation is here. The awareness is wider. The awareness is unbothered, holding it all, but not reacting. And if you notice that the mind starts narrating, have that narrating be a signal to return to the body. And if emotion arises, allow that emotion to be experienced as a sensation in the body. If a memory arises, notice it as an image, a thought. And most importantly, notice that memory as a feeling tone. Because everything is allowed to be here, to appear. And nothing is required to stay, nothing is required to go away. Now, let's bring in some kindness, not forced sweetness, just a simple tone of non-hostility, as if you are sitting beside something in pain and you don't need to fix it. You're simply present with it. Sometimes it can always help to place a hand on the heart or belly. Sometimes it helps to just simply offer a phrase when we're trying to reveal and feel an emotion, an unpleasant sensation. We can say phrases like, "This too belongs." Or, "I can be with this." And just be curious about how the body responds to this. Perhaps not. It softens. Maybe it doesn't. Either way, the practice is the same. Not fixing, welcoming, presence, allowance, revealing, feeling. over and over and over again. Reveal and feel 1 time, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, and soon the practice of revealing and unconditionally, lovingly feeling leads to healing. And you'll start to notice that the anger or the grievance or the shame or the fear begins to soften and change. Now, let's return again to the breath. Breath, body, sounds, a wide, expansive field, and notice what is true. Experience simply comes. Experience goes. What is it that remains? Awareness remains. Now, let's practice with one more layer here. Notice any subtle identity that forms around an experience. Notice the thought, perhaps, if it's an unpleasant experience, a thought that might say, I shouldn't feel this, or there's something wrong, perhaps with me. And when you notice that, label it gently, thinking, or story. And then return the attention back to the raw sensation. So now rest. There's nothing to solve, nothing to fix. There's just this moment, exactly as it already is. And notice right now, if there is even a quiet taste of inner stillness, an inner peace and easiness when we've practiced not fighting. And as we close, take a fuller breath. Feel the support beneath you. And remind yourself of this teaching one more time. The unpleasant sensation isn't the enemy. The resistance to it, well, that's the weight, that's the burden. So carry that into this day, into your day, as a simple practice. Whenever something unpleasant arises, first, notice perhaps the subtle or large no, and then soften it. Then feel what remains when we stop fighting. What remains is inner peace. And in these teachings, inner peace is the highest form of happiness.